In Nigeria, the Supreme Court has upheld the election of Ondo State Governor Rotimi Akeredolu. The Constitutional Court's ruling follows an appeal by the candidate of the opposition People's Democratic Party. Mr. Jagede had appealed Akeredolu's election. However, the court upheld Akeredolu's victory in the October 10, 2020 gubernatorial election. The majority decision delivered by Justice Emmanuel Agim upheld Akeredolu's election on the grounds that the appeal by Mr. Jagede and the People's Democratic Party lacked merit, since the appellants failed to include Yobe State Governor and Chairman Caretaker Committee of the All Progressives Congress, Mai Mala Buni, as party in the suit. The majority decision also agreed with the decision of the tribunal that failure of the appellants to include Buni was fatal to their case.
What the three justices held essentially is that by virtue of Section 183 of the Constitution, not just an act, that a person cannot be a governor and also be the chairman of a party, whether caretakership or whatever, at the same time. So it is a wrong decision for the party to not only breach the Constitution, but to breach its own Constitution and then breach the guidelines set for the election. Now, with respect to the decision, the majority decision, all they said essentially was that Mai Mala Buni ought to have been joined as a party. You cannot join a person against whom you laid no allegation. We made no allegation against Mai Mala Buni.
The Supreme Court has not said that a sitting governor should not preside over the affairs of the party. Don't forget, the majority decision stands and not the minority decision.
Thank you, sir.
So Mala Buni still remain the caretaker chairman of the party, validly put in there by the party. The Supreme Court has not nullified his position.
Ondo people are very happy, and that was evidenced by the large turnout during the election itself on the 10th of October 2020. So it is the wish of Ondo State people that was demonstrated on that day.
Well, congratulations are in order to Governor Akeredolu. Hopefully now he can face governance and deliver on those promises.
All right, congratulations in order, most importantly, to the Ondo people. So the distraction, whatever political distraction has been going on, has all been laid to rest now, so that the governor can face true governance of the people, which he's truly elected for. And somebody will hope that we'll have in Nigeria at some point that we don't have to decide electoral matters and have long-winded court battles, where after the polls, when the people decide, we can keep to that. But there are many sides to it. Let's look at the dissenting side. Out of 7 sitting, 3 were dissenting. The PDP has picked that up and said that's a strong indication that they had a case. It still goes back to this, Constitution and the case about APC and leadership of Mai Mala Buni, and 183, Section 183 of the Nigerian Constitution that talks about, sitting governor and the likes, and still being ahead, of a political party, and that's what they are pushing for here. But like you said, like you heard there, the technicality was based on the fact that they didn't include Mai Mala Buni in the case, and they didn't put them as a party to the case. And when you look at that, the PDP is saying, yes, we have a strong point here. We have a strong point to be able to make a case in this. But when you look at it deeply, it's all in this long gamut of the political wrangling between the two top political parties, the APC and the PDP. This is one definitely to watch. And this is just one out of a litany of cases. Another one coming up thick and fast will be the Zamfara one. We'd like to see the outcome of that. The PDP has gone to court as regards what is happening in Zamfara. I would like to see the interpretation of the law. But one thing is certain in all of this, most importantly, we should get to a point in our political lives in this country where people can decide election at the polls, and we don't need to go through this rigmarole, because just look at what it cost the people in the states while all of this was going on.
Well, the judicial process is part of the electoral process. Rather than people resorting to self-help, it's always best in circumstances like this to go through the courts. And it's good at the end of the day that, the Supreme Court has, given its ruling. 2 cases, really, before the Supreme Court. There was an appeal by Jagede SAN, who disagreed with the July 16, 2021 decision of the Court of Appeal, which upheld the ruling of the Ondo State Government Election Petitions Tribunal. And so Jagede SAN decided to take the matter all the way to the Supreme Court, and Governor Akeredolu also filed a cross appeal. And what are the issues? I mean, originally, Jagede SAN, Ita Jagede SAN, who was the PDP candidate, and his party, were questioning the validity of Governor Akeredolu's nomination and participation in that election, because his nomination form was signed by the acting caretaker chairman of the APC, of the All Progressives Congress, and that's Malam Buni. But, well, what the Supreme Court has decided now is that that's a party affair. Now, another issue, although I have not seen the full text of the two judgments, the majority judgment and the minority judgment, Jagede's team, also Akeredolu's team, also argued that the filing of the petition of the case by Ita Jagede SAN was originally statute barred. So I guess both in terms of the majority judgment and the minority judgment, there will be a lot to learn from it. But I must commend the two gentlemen. They've conducted themselves, within the framework of the law. There has been no outbreak of violence after the election in Ondo State, and I hope that both parties will accept the judgment in good faith, and then see this as an opportunity to work together. The two of them are friends, by the way. Yeah. I think we interviewed them on this program, yes, and they were both very polite to each other. So the judicial process has been exhausted, so they should look forward to the next round of election, to the future, and see how they and all their supporters can work together for the good of the people of Ondo State. Well, we hope that a day will come when there wouldn't be too many litigations. But that won't happen until you have an electoral process that is more credible, that is stronger, that is more transparent, and that's the challenge, not just for the professional political class, but also for the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Well said. Some would say that's how we got here in the first place, having off-season elections, because the courts, decided, had the final say when it came to our electoral matters.
There will always be court cases because people will always raise questions. But let's hope that people will develop more faith so that the number of cases going to tribunal and the courts will be reduced.
Great. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Brutus Odiri, Michael Wilson, myself, as well as Aaron Akeredolu to give you updates on the Africa Global Business, COVID-19, as well as sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the morning show. Rotus, let's go straight to you. Rotus, how's it going, my friend?
Doing good, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesola. Good morning to all our viewers. We pick up on the African Business Update where we left off yesterday. The continuing discussions around the end of FX sales to Bureau de Change. Financial Derivatives Company Limited, think tank research firm run, of course, by economist Bismarck Rouhani, who's a member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, has hailed the move by the central bank to end those FX sales. And in fact, FTC called it a disruption, that is ending those sales, calling it a disruption to one of the juiciest economic rackets in Nigeria, the end of a gravy train, essentially. And he also proposed a solution because he said, that's FTC said, Financial Derivatives said, that replacing BDCs with banks isn't really going to make much of a difference. And that what needs to be done is that there needs to be a rate adjustment, and the discount rates between what is sold to the banks should be reduced to 10 naira. So the example that was given by FTC was that if the rate is going at 500, then the bank should not be able, they should get it at 490 from the central bank. And if they sell at 550, then that rate should then be moved to 540. So even said the BDCs can be allowed to buy from the banks as well, like everyone else. But that 10 naira difference is what should be maintained regardless of where the parallel market goes. which essentially is a rate adjustment, right? Because in the previous, what was previously sold to BDCs at about the I&E rates, a little under 410, is what gave way to this round tripping, where round tripping you're getting a rate at a rate at one particular level and then selling at a much higher rate in the parallel market and then taking your profits from there. So that's the solution that has been put forward. Again, we will, Tilewa Adebajo, who is the head of CFG Advisory, also said that, look, this is going to, we've already seen it, in fact, on the front page of this day newspaper for today. The parallel market rate should be about 525 or so, but it's jumped, in the short term. But I mean, to me, I think that's just speculation overnight, with a lot of folks thinking that this move by the central bank is going to cause a grip on supply, and so that's what's causing the appreciation in rate. Because remember, the CBN has, of course, disbursed $200 million to the banks in order for this to quell the speculation, but still we're seeing the parallel market move. So that's the comments from FDC, Financial Derivatives Company Limited, suggesting that there should be a 10 naira, no more than a 10 naira difference that should be allowed to move between what is sold to retail banks and what they then sell to end users. We move to oil and gas. Dr. Sanusi Barkindo, Secretary General of OPEC, was at the 14th edition of the Nigerian Association of Energy Economies, NAEE, and he said that OPEC is very worried about the decline in oil and gas investments, and that resource-dependent nations like Nigeria should be should take precautions as far as diversifying their income streams because of the push against fossil fuel investments, the whole push with renewables, and of course the impact of the COVID pandemic, saying that Nigeria was facing a triple whammy in terms of a decline in oil prices, the COVID pandemic, recessions, and so on and so forth. And of course, the fossil fuel push. I think the figure he puts, the amount of investment that is needed in oil and gas sector is about, I think, $12 trillion in total between now and 2045 to be able to catch up with what's been lost. Now, remember, yesterday we were talking about the declining amount of capital importation that's come into Nigeria, in particular foreign direct investment, $77 million. I mean, there are wealthy billionaires that could deposit that money on their own. So this ties into that, in that, Barkindo is saying that Nigeria has to diversify her income streams in order to hedge against this impact of declining investment in the oil and gas sector. So that is a warning that needs to be heeded. Again, from Dr. Sanusi Barkindo, Secretary General of OPEC. We move to President Buhari. He's said that investment in education in Nigeria, not investment, budget allocation in the appropriation bill is going to increase by 50% from 2022 to 2023. And then interestingly, he also said it will go up by 100% by 2025. But he's no longer going to be in office. So I don't know how that works. But this is essentially coming out from the Education Summit Forum that he's attended in London with Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, and also Boris Johnson. So that's President Buhari. They're saying that funding is going to increase by 50% in the appropriation bill. Of course, there's a whole lot of other issues in our education system besides funding. We move to Kenya, since I just mentioned Uhuru Kenyatta. The Monetary Policy Committee in Kenya, I mentioned this yesterday, that they will be making a decision. They made a decision late yesterday, and it was expected. They held their benchmark interest rate at 7%. Again, it's the same language in South Africa, same language in Nigeria, same language in Ghana, same language in Kenya. It's an accommodative stance. They want to see things improving in the Kenyan economy and allow things to proceed as they've been. Kenya they've made a decent recovery, not to jinx them. The inflation is about 6%, I believe, 6% inflation. Food inflation maybe 7.5, 7.8. So it's in single digits, like South Africa, like Ghana. The Kenyan shilling trades at 108 to the dollar, so it's a relatively strong currency. It's seen a little bit of volatility because of the COVID pandemic, but I mean 108 to the dollar. That's a currency that's strong enough to withstand inflationary pressures for the average Kenyan. Horticultural exports flowers. Kenya makes a lot of money from exporting flowers. Valentine's Day, they make a whole lot of money. Their tourism sector is slowly picking up. Summer is, of course, coming up. Of course, they've had, Kenyatta had to announce lockdowns, but I think it's eased them a bit. And so the economy is, they're not doing, tech, we can talk about tech, we can talk about, Rufai, you talk a lot about the mobile money, Safaricom, how they dominate mobile money there, M-Pesa. So there's, Kenya has they're doing okay. They're not doing too badly. In fact, on top of that, still on Kenya, the Kenyatta coming out of the same announcements. In fact, I think this announcement was made right as the education summit began with Buhari and with Boris Johnson. There was an MOU that was signed between Dominic Raab, Trade Secretary, and Kenyatta, to where 132, I hope I'm not transposing the numbers, 132, 123 million pound investment is going to be made between Kenya and the UK, where there's the establishment of the Nairobi International Financial Center Authority, which will also include a collaboration with the London Stock Exchange. So Prudential, which is one of the big insurance companies, says it's going to be, hopping in here and taking part in this Nairobi International Financial Center Authority. Okay. There's a Kenyan mining company that says they're going to dually list on the Nairobi Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange. So a lot of good news coming out of Kenya in the last 24 hours.
All right, Rotus, but what is the good news coming out? How many deals have we signed in Nigeria? Because for me, it's one thing to go for all of these international conferences. The second thing is for us to sign deals. I remember the Toyota deal that went to Ghana. It was signed at that Japan-Africa summit, isn't it? That was where the deal was signed. And, people talk, yes, on the sidelines of every conference and they strike deals. So we need to start seeing deals being signed because that's also foreign direct investment that comes to Nigeria. On education, we're way behind. Rotus, we used to have about 10.6% of our budget go to education in the last administration. And that was around 2014 thereabout. But now it's about 5% of our budget. The 746 billion or thereabout we have for education this year is a paltry sum. Even if you increase it by 50%, that still goes to little about a trillion naira. It's still a paltry sum. I'll give you an instance. The state of California spent close to $100 billion on education. One state, just one state, the state of California, not other states in America. So you can imagine how much is being spent on education
California is
in
pretty
general.
big.
And it is education that will push the economy forward. It is education that will drive research, that will embolden, people to be able to do great things in the economy and will provide alternative forms of revenue generation. Like Mr. Barkindo was saying, we need to create those alternative forms of revenue generation. Oil has failed us, oil will continue to fail. I keep saying that the ice age did not end because people ran out of ice. It was because people invested in other things. And that's why we should invest in other areas. The oil sector is down. Nobody's investing in oil again. What are the alternative areas? Taiwan is investing big deal in semiconductors. Education can help us get those factories started. So we should look at education critically. It all ties together.
Poor funding of education has been a perennial problem in Nigeria. And, we've been far below the international standard. Education for all, under the Dakar framework, recommends between 15 to 20%. And in the last, 10, 11 years, we've not been able to get up to 15% or even 20% of budget. In 2011, it was 9.3% of the budget. In 2012, it was 9.86% of the annual budget. Now, in 2014, we got up to 10%. But the worst in the last decade is the proposal in the 2021 budget, 5.6%. That is what is there. So it's good to hear the president, committing, along with other world leaders, to a 50% increase in the budget of Nigeria in terms of education. Because, studies indicate that there is a connection between the quality of financing, or if you like, the quality of education funding, and also the quality of education. I guess, Nigerian teachers, academics particularly, members of ASU and the other associations in the universities, well, this is one of the things they've been fighting for, increased funding for the education sector. I hope, later they will hold the president down to his promise. But if it is 50%, what is additional 50% of 5.6? So, I mean, that will still be a very low figure. But as an expression of intention, maybe later by next year, we'll be able to hold the government to his own promises.
Right, okay. Thank you so much, Rotus. We'll quickly move on to Global Business Update. Michael Wilson joins us from France. Michael, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, a bit of soothing to the markets, really, from the Federal Open Markets Committee meeting yesterday in the United States, and also a bit of a rebound, therefore, in markets, which have had a rather torrid couple of days, but a rebound yesterday. Hong Kong stocks up about 3%. Chinese tech stocks up on Tencent up 9%, Alibaba up 6.3%, Meituan up 9%. Mainland China stocks up as well. Shenzhen Composite also up 2.2%. The Nikkei up. SoftBank up 2.5%. It's selling a third of its stake in Uber. Uber shares down as a result of that. And I should bring to your attention Sony as well. It's sold more than 10 million PlayStation 5s, which makes it the biggest consumer selling item in its history. So much more generally then, China has been trying to soothe investors' nerves. If you remember, we've reported over the past few weeks on the crackdown on the tech sector there. It will now allow IPOs in the United States, provided they meet listing requirements. Now, they're very, very complicated, but basically what it does is it allows international investors to access shares of Chinese companies in the United States. And it really underlines the need that China is now seeing for an injection of foreign capital into its markets and into its companies, which I have to say, as we've often said again on this program, that no man is an island. It's good to see what appears to be some sort of global cooperation. But I just throw some figures at you, which I was looking at this morning. Over the last 10 years, for example, the S&P 500, which is taken as a good domestic indicator of what's going on in the United States, up 240%. China just up 35% in the last 10 years, and emerging markets up 7%. So you can see that there's a lot of interest in the US markets and a lot of interest in attracting some of that investment capital back into China. So back to the Fed then, and this is really something that was underlining where the markets were going to go today after that crucial meeting yesterday. I'm going to draw your attention, if I may, to a particular phrase, which is the most important one. It's called substantial further progress. Now, what that means is it's what the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, was saying only a couple of weeks ago. He was saying that they will not do anything about inflation or about growth until they see this substantial further progress in the economy. That benchmark is a complete benchmark on inflation and employment. And until that starts to happen, no chance of rise in interest rates. That's what that code actually means. Now, some market indicators looked at the ins and outs of what he was saying yesterday and took from that the reduction in quantitative easing might just be gaining a little bit of talking about. That may be some tapering ahead, but it's still a long way off. Remember that they're juggling a lot in the United States at the moment. The growth, the fastest there since 1983. But given all that, not a great deal of movement as far as Wall Street was concerned yesterday, and futures, as far as Wall Street's concerned, are relatively flat this morning. Just in case you thought that President Joe Biden had put the idea of trade with China to the bottom of his inbox, not so. He's nominated Huawei prosecutor to a key China exports position in the United States administration. She's called Thea Kendler, and she has been working with the Justice Department, talking about Huawei in the National Security Division. So there is still some aggression as far as the United States is concerned towards China exports. And just as far as domestic things in the United States are concerned, I should also mention that the Senate voted to push ahead with the bipartisan infrastructure plan. So in other words, these are talks about talks, which again is something we were saying probably would happen, given there was a bit of negativity last week. Facebook, that reported yesterday, that was one of the big tech ones. Interesting, 56% rise in second quarter revenues compared with a year ago, but not so much in the future. So a lot of dampening of expectations as far as investors are concerned. And that didn't do an enormous amount for the share price. However, I think the most important thing about this is that it's showing Facebook and the other big tech companies that use ad revenues are finding that ad revenues are going up. And in the old days, i.e. before the pandemic, you used to look at ad revenues and say they were a good indicator of where economies were actually going. And Facebook has not been hurt. If you remember, Apple said, there's a choice now if you want to be chased by advertisers or not. Facebook is not going to do that, and it shrugged off that particular advantage that Apple may have thought it had with that particular policy. As far as the EU is concerned, now the EU, what an interesting situation. This is the economy chief is saying that there should be no more fudging as far as budgets are concerned in the United States. Paolo Gentiloni, clearly an Italian, who's Mario Draghi, of course, is in power in Italy, ex-European Union chief, somebody with whom the survival of it is credited not that many years ago. He is saying, this new chap, Paolo, is now saying that post-pandemic realities and a surge in public debt to 100% of GDP in many companies call on countries now to be absolutely honest about where they are with their budgets. And this has been a slight bugbear for investors in the past who looked at countries like Italy, like Greece, like Spain, like Portugal, in their original accessions to the European Union and said they didn't tell the complete truth about their budgets and their budget deficits. So he's trying to do something about that. Let me bring you to the UK, if I may. A slight relaxation as far as travel is concerned, although it's still very, very confused. Where I am in France, there have been demonstrations, as you probably heard, about vaccine passports, vaccine passports allowing people to go into restaurants and clubs and so on. So all is not settled about that. And clearly, there are still lots of hoops to go through before tourism, both ways, from the EU into the UK, and also from the United States into the UK, and vice versa, comes to a satisfactory conclusion. So a slight relaxation, but not a lot. As far as UK car production is concerned, this is quite serious. Below 1 million for the second year running. In fact, car production is down 40%. It's worth noting that what we were saying right at the beginning of the year, that Honda saying we're not going to build any electric cars in the UK, we're going to choose other countries within which to do it, comes to fruition this weekend. They close their doors in Swindon for the final time. And finally, to commodities, and oil just trading very, very sideways, really, round about where it was yesterday, 74, 75 as far as Brent crude is concerned. Gold, though, now here's an interesting one, at 1807 in Western trade. In Asia trade, up to 1814. It could be 1822 per ounce by the weekend, really depending on what people's expectations about inflation actually are. That's
all right, Michael. All right, Michael, real quickly, I mean, a lot of stories just to dig into, but I'll go straight to it. Porsche now, the family... their own majority shares in Volkswagen, Ferdinand Porsche family, they're trying to put some money into space travel now. So they're trying to get into something called the European space race. Could this be because of what they're seeing with Jeff Bezos on Blue Origin and Richard Branson? They're going into the space race, see if they can be space contractors. I mean, what's your take on that? So a lot of people have been very critical of this billionaire space race. Maybe it's not a bad thing anyway. I mean, when you look at it critically. That's one, Michael. And tapering is the message coming out of America. What are we to learn from that? The Fed is tapering everything.
Okay, first of all, Volkswagen and the European space race. I think what the view about all this is, it's fine these billionaires going into space. It does push forward the commercial realities and the possibilities of actually going into space, making travel more quick as far as the Earth is concerned. A lot of problems, of course, back on Earth. So anything to do with the European space race, it's good. The problem with it is, of course, it's a different view from different countries. And a lot of them will be saying to each other, do you know what? Actually, we have got enough problems right here as far as COVID is concerned before we start having a concerted and a unified view about space travel. I think it's a long way in the future. I would tie any thoughts about it to the fact of whether it's going to be a commercial reality or not, and whether it opens up as a business. Your other question was what was the other thing you were asking?
The
me?
Fed's tapering.
The big message from the Fed. Now the question there is, what do you actually get when you look at the minutes? I told you that some market observers thought that there might be a slight suggestion of tapering from what the FOMC was saying yesterday. I have to say, you know, they have finer antenna than I do. I didn't see that at all. But if the market's taking it as that, then I think you can assume that's what's happening. It takes an awful lot of careful movements to actually let air out of a balloon like this, and they're going to have to do it very, very, very slowly indeed, as are all central banks all the way around the world. So I think, according to the markets, there was a vague signal of that, but it's going to take a long time, and it's not going to happen tomorrow or indeed the weekend.
Well, there is a poll conducted by, I think, Reuters of 500, economists from around the world, and the economists are saying more or less the same thing that came out of the FOMC meeting in the United States, namely that, look, the economy needs to be given time to grow and that inflationary pressures are transitory. But the heads of big corporations do not share that view. They think that, this is something really to worry about. They are facing supply chain disruptions, they are facing labor shortages, and they think that, prices will still go higher. Where do you strike the balance between the economists and the persons running the business?
I agree with, 500 economists, yes, of course. You're going to get that sort of idea that they are taking the same view as the Fed. In other words, that the spikes of inflation are transitory at the moment. The thing is the long-term view. As far as corporate companies are concerned, you would not invest in a company that did not hedge against the possibility of higher interest rates. Of course they're doing that. I would absolutely do it. What they're seeing is quite right too. You've noted is constriction of supply chains and so on, which at the end of the day is probably going to push prices up. But at the same time, if we've learned anything from the pandemic and anything from that sort of digital way of solving things, it sounds terribly vague, but I think companies will be looking at supply chain in a very different way. I think they'll be onshoring a lot of their activities, onshoring a lot of semiconductor production and so on. So I think we're going to see big changes. But if I were the CFO of any major international company, of course I would be hedging the company against the possibility of higher interest rates. Of course I would. Why wouldn't I?
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right. Adesua, morning.
Good morning again, Rufai. Well, for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic across the globe, let's begin by taking a look at the figures. The global infection total is projected to pass 200 million within days. At the moment, there are over 195 million cases, at least 4.1 fatalities, and over 3.9 billion doses of the vaccines have been administered. Now, the 5 countries that reported the most cases over the last week include the US, Brazil, Indonesia, the UK, and India. There are other countries recording biggest increases, such as France, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Cuba, and Japan. In fact, in the last 24 hours, the Olympics host city, Tokyo, again reported another all-time high with almost 3,200 infections. And just like Tokyo, Nigeria has also recorded a record high of daily cases. 535. That's the figure coming in the last 24 hours of new infections, and 5 COVID-19 related deaths were recorded in the country. That's a breakdown of the states polling those numbers. Again, Lagos posted majority with 219 infections. In the Americas, COVID-19 continues to inflict a devastating toll, with countries in the region responsible for the world's highest weekly death rates, and that's according to the Pan-American Health Organization, PAHO. Over the last week, there were over 1.26 million COVID-19 cases and nearly 29,000 deaths reported in the Americas. So far, only 16.6% of the population of Latin America and the Caribbean has been fully vaccinated against the virus. Let's go to Tanzania and bring you an update as President Samia Suluhu Hassan has received her COVID-19 vaccine in public, kicking off a nationwide inoculation campaign in one of the world's last countries to embrace the jabs in the fight against the disease. President Hassan's vaccination on Wednesday was the most decisive signal yet of a break from the policies of her predecessor, who repeatedly dismissed the threat of the pandemic. She received the jab of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine alongside her Prime Minister, the Chief Justice, and other leaders, and she's urging Tanzanians to get vaccinated as she expressed confidence in the safety and efficacy of the jabs. Well, more reprieve may be coming the way of lower and middle income countries struggling to get the much needed vaccines, as the UK will this week begin delivering 9 million COVID-19 vaccines, and that's according to the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. Of the 9 million doses, 5 million are to go to COVAX, which we then share equitably among those who need them the most. Another 4 million doses will now be shared directly to a list of countries, with Indonesia to receive 600,000 doses. Jamaica, we are told, will receive 300,000 doses. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be offering over 800,000 doses in person to Kenya President Uhuru Kenyatta when they meet during the Education Summit in the UK. Now, the doses being donated at the University of Oxford's AstraZeneca vaccine, the UK had pledged to donate 100 million vaccines overseas by June 2022, and 80 million of those 100 million will go to COVAX. The rest will be donated directly by the country. Meanwhile, still in the UK, fully vaccinated travelers from the US and parts of the EU will be allowed to travel to the country starting next Monday without the need to quarantine for 10 days, as their vaccination status will now be recognized by the government. And finally, this is something we all have to watch. The Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan has carried out arguably the fastest vaccination campaign to be executed during this pandemic. In just 7 days, Bhutan administered nearly 500,000 shots and fully vaccinated 90% of its adult population. It has a population of 800,000 people. You may say it's a small country, but this tiny kingdom has provided a lesson on how to tackle a common problem at a faster pace than anywhere else in the world.
I think we should learn from them.
Yes.
There are lessons to learn from Bhutan. That country had done a lot in terms of fighting misinformation. They have about 22,000 persons volunteering just to, mobilize people and help deliver doses to rural communities. Second is the fact that, yes, you mentioned the fact that the population is small, 800,000, but it's not about the population, the size of the population. It's about leadership. It's about, being able to mobilize the people. And Bhutan has been able to do very well with regard also to effective messaging. And so in that country, there's a lot of enthusiasm for the vaccine. So vaccine hesitancy, which is a problem elsewhere, is not a problem at the moment in Bhutan. Well, maybe you can attribute that to the fact that the Prime Minister is a medical professional, the Health Minister, and also the Foreign Minister, who are all involved in this vaccination drive, are all within the medical profession. Now, as for the Latin America, you said 16.6% of the people of Latin America and the Caribbean have been vaccinated so far. But the major concern that has been raised by the director of the Pan-American Health Organization, Dr. Carissa F. Etienne, that's her name, is that, look, the kind of crisis that they have is even in Latin America is even beyond COVID. The figures are going up in Ecuador, in Cuba, in Argentina, in Mexico. But as a result of this, COVID-19 pandemic in that part of the world, they have had to neglect in many of the countries basic immunization, like immunization for measles, for children in Mexico, for example, and she is saying clearly that, look, very soon in Latin America, you may have to be dealing with another kind of public health crisis that may be as serious as that of COVID-19, which is the point that, is made in other public health systems. To which, look, yes, you can focus on COVID-19, but that should not be to the neglect of other public health issues, particularly basic immunization, because then, you can have greater difficulties within the system. You recall that at a point, that was part of the conversation also in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
I mean, very well said. A lot to learn from Bhutan, but also it has shown that we can do things quicker. I think it was Croatia or Serbia too that tested en masse. They were testing people over the weekend, and I think they got about 2 million tests out, a sizable portion of their population. So that shows that we can do things quicker. The question is, when is Nigeria going to learn from this? When are we going to get even the vaccines in the first place? When are we going to move quickly to vaccinate our population? Because we think it's a joke. I'm looking at those stats. I have always contested those NDDC numbers. NCDC numbers. I've always contested those numbers. And time will prove me right. Because when you look at it, the data is not well collected. Some states don't put in the numbers on time. I believe we have more than 500 cases. There are more. And you always have the case where 2-3 days after they say, oh, they didn't collect some data for some states. So we think it's all a joke. It is people that are in the isolation centers that know what is going on. So please, if we can do everything possible, learn from Bhutan. Small nations are doing it. Small nations like Cuba are getting their own vaccines, sending their own vaccine candidates through. I mean, if you check the GDP of Cuba compared with Nigeria, it's not that Cuba is better. But they've been able to get their vaccine candidate through because they've built stronger health institutions. We've passed a supplementary project. What are we using it for? These are the questions we should ask ourselves. Please. Only 0.6% of our population is vaccinated. Please.
But quickly, let's commend the United Kingdom. This is part of the fallout of the G7 summit in Cornwall, when the countries, the participating countries, pledged to provide support. And now you have the case of the United Kingdom supplying 9 million, vaccine doses, 5 million to countries under the COVAX facility, 4 million to other countries that are heavily in need. And some of those countries have also been identified. And, in total, the United Kingdom is promising up to about 100 million doses in terms of, support for other countries. And those vaccines will be labeled UK, but they will not be used inside the United Kingdom. Dominic Raab put it very well. He says, no one is safe until everybody is safe. And that's the whole point about global solidarity, about rich countries providing support for, more vulnerable populations of the world.
Thank you.